Today's featured guest is Randall Kaplan. He is a freelance illustrator, designer, and animator. He's developing a film called Boxhead. He has a really cool, dark kind of studio lighting quality to his work, which we're going to talk about later. My favorite quote that I read about you is Kaplan expertly blends the uncanny, grotesque, and the touching. And I love that quote, whoever said that about you, because it really explains that there's a concept behind your work and there's a meaning there. And we're going to definitely get into talking about that. So Randall, it's nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I appreciate you responding to the call for artists. So I want you to explain a little bit about your chosen medium and what you work with.
Well, I work with, oh, there's a plane going by. Um, we're in the line of an airport here, so, anyway, I work with mainly analog. I start hand drawn, so everything is hand drawn, whether it's a drawing, a simple drawing, or a painting, or a hand painted painting, or a piece of animation. I draw frame by frame, hand drawn, and I scan it into the computer to composite it. But everything starts out analog in that way, and I do the same thing with music. I start out with analog synths, like this one right here, actually. This one is a synth from 1978. It's
Cool.
it's my like baby, I love this thing. But I the music is part of what I do because it was always incorporated into the film making. And I
Right.
music with the films, and it started off years ago when I just was messing around with sound, and eventually started to acquire synthesizers and all that. And now I'm just totally into music, but I like to incorporate it with the visual, and the same way that I like to look at it the same way as I start off a drawing or painting. I start off a composition with with an analog synth. So it's kind of like the equivalent of a pencil, or a paintbrush.
Does the drawing make the music or does the music make the drawing?
A good question. It depends on the idea. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm an artist, but I have zero talent when it comes to drawing. So it always impresses me, and I always want to know when I speak to someone who draws, do you draw from your head or can you draw from memory? I know everybody has a different way of, some people can copy something perfectly. Some people can actually design something in their head and draw it the way it looks in their head, which I think is just incredible. How do you work?
Yeah, it's kind of the skill, whatever skill I have was acquired over time. I'm not like some of these people who are born with this amazing ability to mimic reality in their art. I was not able to do that for many years. I was totally unable to mimic reality. I was just able to come up with ideas. And it took a lot of hard work to get to a point where I was able to get a form right.
Sounds
That
cool.
being said, the forms usually are in my head. They're always in my head, but sometimes I like to look at reference for, it's always good to look at reference the same way you would a figure drawing or something. For anatomy purposes, if you want to get something to evoke realism in some form, and you have the idea in your head, but you want the idea to express it as real, as if it was real in some form, and physically manifest that idea in 3 dimensions, or at least the illusion of 3 dimensions. In that case, it's helpful to have some reference, or at least an understanding of anatomy. And I acquired that over time. That was work to do that. The ideas weren't work. That's the thing that I had. And I
Right.
still like to the ideas for the inspiration. And,
Which is the
the
most
idea,
important part of art, in my opinion. The idea, the concept, and then the medium is the next step. How do you bring that to life? And what are you choosing to use to make that happen? Why would you say that you have chosen to kind of go into this genre of, it's kind of a creepy realm. It's not quite full on horror, but there's definitely a darkness to it. Why is that your aesthetic?
life. I don't know. I mean, you know, it's hard to ignore darkness in life, but it's also, it was something that spoke to me at a young age. I was afraid of it at first, and then I eventually it became my art. Um, you know, I was excited by it. I was interested in it, but I was scared. I was really scared like hell I was scared of everything as a kid. So that, I think, started, the journey, if you're going to call it that, this back and forth with darkness. And the things that scared me, and I realized they weren't necessarily really scary, they were moving.
Very, very good.
And
Very good.
that's I
Yeah, one of the main things that I always wonder when I see horror films or the design of a certain character is, where did it come from? And I always want to know if there's some kind of fear from the artist that inspired it. And I think that's basically what you just said. Do you ever get kind of the wrong reactions from spectators or from people who are viewing your work, even if it's just family?
there's no wrong reaction, there's just reactions that I dislike.
Right, exactly.
Every reaction is fine. It's all genuine as far as I know. I mean, unless it's not genuine, in that case, then it's bull. But but if there's real reactions, that's their reaction. But I don't necessarily like them all. I think the thing that I dislike most of all, it happens all the time, and it's normal. But I think the thing that gets frustrating for any artist is when they're pigeonholed.
Right.
And it's like, oh, that's like this. Oh, I know what that is. That's just like this. It's like, well, then why did I do it?
Right. And that's where you start getting into your explanation of depth and what something actually ends up meaning to you. So, like you said earlier, you looked at something, you thought it was scary, and then you kind of worked that out by drawing it, painting it, and now it means something more to you and it's not as scary. And sometimes when you get these bad reactions, explaining it to people, it just creates something new for both of you.
Well, it's like everyone can have their own interpretation of everything, and that's fine. And they should. It's not my place to tell you what to think. I'm just showing you something, and you think what you want.
So, in that context, what role do you think horror has in society today?
Good question. I mean, it's a great. I love thinking about that, and pondering that, and talking about it with like-minded people. I love that. There's no one answer for that. I think the best way to think about it, or at least the thing that comes off the top of my head, is it's a catharsis
True.
of dealing with, especially, I mean, look, right now, right now we're just coming out of something really horrific, and really scary times, and we're still in them. Let's face it. It's not.
Right.
There's been some positive things, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods or we'll ever be out of the woods in terms of darkness, in terms of there's always going to be the darkness. The question is, how do you deal with it?
Right.
And you know, the worst thing you can do is ignore the darkness, because then you're just going to get more darkness, much worse.
Chilling. Chilling. I love the way you explain that. Why do you think that your work is so well, okay, this is just my opinion of your work. I think it's got a very beautiful photographic quality because I'm a photographer, so I see things that way. And the lighting is just exquisite. I mean, it looks like this beautiful, noir, this classic photography style of harsh light. And you use it so well. How did you learn that? Or how do you apply it to your work?
Well, I a lot of it has to do with making black and white films when I was in college, and even before that, I was doing some color, but mainly I kept going back to black and white, and I never kicked that habit. I kept going back into black and white, and black and white film, and playing with lighting and film,
Yes.
like you do in photography, is it blew my mind what could be done with just black and white stark lighting. And it blew my mind when I realized what could be done with it and how far you could go with it. And then I started painting the things that painting as if I was, filming in black and white.
Yes,
So
I can see it and it's gorgeous.
it's kind of like, thank you so much. I mean, I went the way, it's kind of the reverse of like Murnau said he was basing it on paintings. Murnau, Nosferatu and Faust, he's the great silent film director who, was great German expressionist, and German expressionism was a huge influence on me. So the same way he was influenced by paintings, I was influenced by film to do paintings.
Yeah.
I went reverse, I mean, I kind of goes all over the place, paintings led to film, and then film led back to paintings, and so on and so forth. So they all feed each other. And, the same way that black and white film can evoke such power, I wanted to see it. I wanted to do it, but have control over every aspect. So instead of it, I mean, it's just like, in other words, if you're creating something from your head, I just wanted to have that depth and that feeling, too.
Yeah. And it's a really good example of the medium almost becoming part of the conceptual message, because you're forced to have light and dark compete with each other
Right.
within the medium itself.
Well, you only have contrast and texture.
Exactly.
The form, contrast, texture. That's it. No color, no shades, aside from grays. And it's all contrast and texture. And that's what I love about black and white. It's everything pared down to its essence. That's what
So
I love.
you have this you have a video about shadow figures on your website.
Yeah,
And
that's an Amazon that was made for that was a job that I did for the Lore podcast that was turned into a series by Amazon. So it was a podcast that was adapted into a series, and I did the promo for it. And that was the animation for the promo, I should say. It was a mixture of interviews with a psychologist and talking about Jung and sort of fusing using history of serial killers with the shadow, the idea of the shadow, which is the Jungian concept.
the
So
shadow kind
I
of in
did
a
the animation.
psychological form.
Right. So
Not
I
necessarily the shadow figure that we hear about in paranormal stories.
wasn't that, and that disappointed a lot of people that it wasn't about that. It was more about the psychological thing, and people were like, "Oh, I've seen shadow people." Like, okay, I mean, I get it. that's the way they wrote it. But
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 the
but I just
angle was actually pretty cool because, well, okay, I'm my background in photography is art, but I also have a degree in forensics, and I studied forensic photography. And so when you talk about the shadow as self, and how everyone has a shadow, and the things that I've seen and the things that a lot of people are now witnessing because of Netflix specials, people are starting to, it's not just a 2-minute someone was murdered on the news. They're actually hearing about the serial killer and their thought process and their lack of remorse and these things. And so I think that can become so much more interesting than just a shadow figure or shadow man encounter.
it's both, right? Like that's I think what they were trying to do with that piece, and that's what they were trying to get to. The essence of it was that why does it have to be one or the other? Why does it have to be just, why are we just talking about the paranormal or the day-to-day darkness? What if they're connected?
Right. And I think they did a pretty good job of integrating the two. And the illustration showing showing a shadow figure and making it really creepy, and then teaching you something at the same time. It's interesting to me. But on that topic, have you ever had a paranormal experience? Anything terrifying ever happened to you?
Well, those are two different questions. I mean, are
They
they?
are.
Are they? I don't know. That's the same. Goes back to the question. They. I've had a lot of terrifying things happen to me. At least I've had a lot. But have I had a paranormal experience? Yes, and those are probably the least terrifying things that I've. I mean,
I tend to agree.
they're not. The most terrifying things are not, as far as I know, are not paranormal. They're just terrifying. Um, the um, I've had weird. I worked at a bar, my cousin's bar in Brooklyn, and it was a space that she was convinced was haunted. She was convinced that there were, excuse me, spirits around, and
Uh-huh.
she actually had a shrine to calm them, and,
Wow.
yeah, and it was interesting. And then when I went down to uh, sort through the bottles. I went down into the basement, but I'd always do, to sort through the bottles and clean up. And then this piece of paper smacked me in the face. There was no wind, no nothing. I heard voices, first of all. I heard voices. I should add that. And this piece of paper smacked me in the face, and it had a phone number on it.
Wow.
And I didn't call it.
You didn't call it. Oh, the suspense will forever kill me.
I didn't know. I feel like such a jerk for not calling. But messed up at the time. I didn't want to make my life even more messed up. I wasn't having a great. I was 19, and I was not in a great place. But except for the work, I was making movies, and that was great. But
Cool.
I was a mess. So the voices were nothing new to me. Hearing voices and all this kind of crazy crap. Um, but I do always think that I had, like, I think about it now, and certain experiences that I pretended were normal were kind of otherworldly, and surreal, and that's kind of what I try to capture, like the time slowing down and the strange, a specific experience that chills you, that gets under your skin. It could be reality as we know it, but it's all of a sudden it becomes something else.
And in your childhood, when you talked about being afraid of so much in your childhood and kind of working that through some of your artwork, can you think of one thing that you're willing to mention from back then that just scared you as a kid?
Yeah. There were a lot of things, but I think deformity,
Okay.
um, illness, people with handicaps, as much as, I'm not proud of saying that.
Mm-hmm.
It was disturbing to a child. And what it ended up doing, though, was causing me to be, and I think the fear was coming out of an empathy that I didn't even know what it was.
Right. Yeah,
Because
and being a kid, you don't know what you're experiencing until you're wondering, well, what is that and why and how?
it's
And
just, what is it exactly?
that's
And
completely normal human fear. And can it happen to me?
yeah,
Um, yeah,
you
my little brother has Down syndrome, and I grew up thinking that that was just something normal and everybody, you do or you don't, I guess. And then I think I was probably honestly to about 11 when I realized that it was a special condition that very few people had. And I always wondered, well, how come there are not more people like him? I didn't even think about
yeah,
it that way, but it's different when you don't have
right.
the experience.
At that time, I was Brooklyn. At least, I mean, I always associate this time with very strange things happening because it was the height of the crack epidemic in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
So there was a lot of people on the streets doing drugs.
Mm-hmm. And that is
Obviously,
terrifying for a kid.
yeah. So there was a weird energy, that was out there, and it was New York, ungentrified New York. you know.
Yeah.
So it's all old news for New Yorkers, but I think if you grew up in that as a kid, it's like, what? In that sense, I wasn't sheltered. You know what I mean? I mean, I
Right.
was I was very much a part of. I was seeing things on the streets that I wouldn't have seen in the suburbs. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Which gave me a little bit of of a early clue into some of this stuff. I think.
Yeah. And well, seeing behaviors that you're not used to, because someone who is under the influence is going to be acting a little funny, and it would be super creepy for if you don't know that that's what is happening to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember having creepy experiences as a kid, seeing someone doing something weird or acting funny, and now looking back I'm like, oh, maybe they were just high.
Sure.
But
Yeah. As an adult, you understand it, but there's something magical. I mean, it's not about the fear being magical, but there is something magical about not knowing, and it's otherworldly.
right.
The guy who's high on the street,
Yeah, and making your own story out of it.
it's kind of magical in a way, and it's otherworldly. It's like this creature. I mean, this whole thing becomes evocative of all these ideas and imagination, and when you're a kid, you can do that. I try to go back to that as an adult without losing my mind completely. I try,
Right.
but
Without falling completely into the darkness.
yes, or the insanity, yeah. But 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 you mentioned, going back to your brother. Um, I really think there's a connection between, you know, it's not that the horror is that he has Down syndrome at all. If anything, the horror is probably, I think there's horror in being different. There's fear in being different for everyone.
Right.
So then the empathy, I feel like there's a very strong correlation between empathy and horror. I really do. I think that's something that's not talked about a lot, but it's there. And I think the best example may be Frankenstein.
Yeah, because you feel for him so much, but you still don't want to be him. You know,
Definitely.
you want him to have what he wants, but how can you get it for him?
Right.
And that line between empathy and fear, I think, is so true that you're talking about, because you're you're technically afraid because you feel for the person. And being able to separate it and translate it within your own psychology is probably the difficult part.
And also, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of getting, I mean, how much do you relate to the person who is suffering or not? And how much do you feel what they're feeling? How empathetic, you know, and where does that stop? What if the person is violent?
Right.
Do you then not have any empathy?
Right.
You know, that's the, you know, that's the mind. I don't know if I can say it. Mind, the mind F of it.
Yeah. You can say it. Yeah,
That's no,
well, that's why everybody's going crazy over serial killer documentaries right now.
those people. They're. I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, there's a, you know, we need. That's also the mind fuck is we need law and we need laws and we need a sense of right and wrong in society. But the truth is, we all know someone can snap at any moment, and
Right.
there's the harm.
Anyone.
Anyone, and
Anyone
it's,
can.
yeah, and that's why do we have sympathy for Leatherface? And I mean, we do. You know, people can deny it, but you know, when in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface, he's a monster, but he's so totally sympathetic.
Yeah.
Because and so was Norman Bates.
Right.
Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. I mean, these characters are sympathetic, and we start to like them. What is
Yeah.
that?
Oh, I mean, the most incredible horror movies are the ones that convince you to like the villain.
Yeah.
When you're just rooting for him and you want him to be okay, even though he's the bad guy.
Silence of the Lambs, we like two villains. We like, you know, we like Hannibal Lecter and
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter would be was even worse when he gets out, but we love him.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, and whereas Buffalo Bill is actually suffering mentally. I mean, Buffalo Bill is mentally ill who's suffering. I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, Hannibal Lecter is mentally ill too, but he seems so in control that it's hard to
And
imagine
he's
him.
so intellectual and refined.
So, right. So it's with him, it's like he's like a supervillain. But
Yeah.
Buffalo Bill is more of the reality of someone suffering who is then continuing the cycle of abuse with other people.
So, Randall, you are like perfectly leading me into my last question, which is only a little bit about your art. But if you could choose a horror character, fact or fiction, who you would like to make art with, who would it be and what would you make?
Yeah, yeah.
But you're collaborating with this person or
Right.
character.
With this entity, right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, Hellraiser is one of my favorite horror films of all time. So I think the Cenobites, I think I'd probably have to say the Cenobites from Hellraiser, which not just Pinhead though. I have to get in all four of the original Cenobites and then add in some of my own or something. You know, I mean, Clive Barker is one of my, you know, gods.
Yeah.
Clive Barker changed my life with Hellraiser and his early novels, and you know, that kind of level of visceral horror really blew my mind. And also, again, there was, well, in his way, there's this sadness and this, there is, I mean, there's something sad about all of it in a way, and beautiful in a really twisted way, but you know, and I think that so anyway, the short answer would be not Pinhead, but the Cenobites from Hellraiser.
And what amazing piece of art would you create with them?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, like fan movies of Hellraiser, and you know, I think it would be great someday to play with those characters, you know, in that world. It would be great to be able to try to, you know, show my love for that world through an original film that, would be part of that world, right? So
Well,
I mean, that
I
would be
think
great,
all of
maybe bring Frank back from the.
I think Hellraiser fans would really, that would be a gift to have your style meshed together with that. That would be so fun. I would love to see that. So, Randall, tell everybody where they can find you, what kind of new thing is happening that they can look forward to, and just everywhere they can find you.
All right, so I'm making the animated film Boxhead, and there's updates on the Facebook page as well as my website, and I'm continuously working on that and getting that going. I'm finishing up a piece of music, and I'm going to have a lot more music on Bandcamp. So if you look up Randall Kaplan on Bandcamp, that's where my new music's going to be. And then my website constantly has new art and just new art with animation and music. So everything can be found at my website, which is randallkaplan.net. And then there's Facebook and Instagram, which is Randall Kaplan's Head. The film is an ongoing project, constantly evolving, and since it's hand-drawn animation, it's definitely time-consuming, and the music is a side project right now, but I really love it, and I think I think anyone who is into this world might appreciate the music, and I hope they'd give it a try.
Sounds good. Randall, I want to actually sincerely thank you for jumping on a new podcast, a new project that isn't really out there yet. I really appreciate your time. And I think it's just super cool that an artist is willing to jump onto something that is not established yet. So I appreciate that.
Well, you had the beautiful message, and just a beautiful concept of this thing, and you clearly, and this interview just solidified just how really your understanding of this world that we're talking about, and it's beautiful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for being here. We'll have all of your links and ways to find you in the show notes. So look there. I know that you have downloadable, purchasable
Yeah.
artwork on your website, which is really awesome. So that's going to be available in the show notes for everyone to find you.